I'm Anne Marie Valdez, the president of First Steps Kent, and it is my honor to welcome you to this pre-conference. I wanted to take a moment. We don't normally do this, but really in honor of it being the 19th anniversary of 9/11, maybe just a moment for some self-reflection on your part, but I wanted to tell you a short story. Uh, 19 years ago, a dear friend of mine worked in the South Tower for a company that had 3 or 4 floors of employees. And when the planes hit and the fire department came to make sure that they were evacuated, they knew they were going to have to run down more than 60 flights of stairs to get out of the building. They happened on her floor to work with a young man who was in a wheelchair. And those women who worked in that office with my friend refused to leave unless the fire department agreed to carry him down the 60 flights of stairs. They were not going to leave their colleague. I tell you this story because it really is an example of the American spirit, the spirit that I reflect on with this country, of people being united and inclusive, caring, committed, and really wanting to do for others rather than themselves. And with that spirit, I want to really start this meeting off and just take a couple minutes to reflect on what this day means, what it has meant, and what it will continue to mean for each of us. Okay, Heather, we can go to the next slide. So I've been tasked with giving you just a little bit of an overview of how we've gotten to where we are with Ready by 5. This week has certainly been a week of reflection and thinking about how all this started, how it all transpired to get us to where we are for early childhood in Kent County. And what I will say in reflecting on that work and that movement, it started with a dream, and it really was a dream of committed individuals in the Kent County community to say we need to do more for young children. We need to intervene early and make sure that children are reaching their full potential. And learning about the brain science, learning about the difference that it makes to intervene early and provide services for young children and their families, to make sure that we have equitable outcomes for our children and that we are working to remove disparities. It has been a dream. And when you think about First Steps being around since 2009, it really hasn't been that long, but a lot of movement has happened. And it took all of us. It took our community. It took all the different sectors to come together and say, yes, this is important. We can go to the next slide. So 2 years ago, or nearly 2 years ago, November of 2018, many leaders in this community wanted First Steps to lead the effort on behalf of the early childhood movement to get a ballot measure together for an early childhood millage. And in that election in November 2018, we were successful as a community to pass a 0.25 mil that generates nearly $6 million a year, and that will be for 6 years. And so we happen to be in our third round of funding that we are doing this week, releasing the RFP and welcoming each of you to submit a proposal. When I think about that dream that I referred to, that dream has really become much more of a reality. Heather, we can go to the next slide. We are so fortunate here in Kent County that after the millage was passed, First Steps was able to really build a partnership with the Kent County administration. And it has been a very good working relationship. And also at the same time, we have built a strong relationship with the early childhood service providers. And many of you are represented here today. This is all part of the dream that we envisioned so long ago and have been working toward. And it feels like it's really happening, that we really are going to change circumstances for young children and families, despite everything, despite the pandemic that we're in, despite all the racial disparities and injustice that are happening. We are truly committed to making a difference and changing the world for our youngest children. Before I end, I do want to mention that a big part of the dream has been creating a dream team. And we have that now here at First Steps, a dream team of staff who I could only imagine, just a few years ago would be the folks that put this together, that work with each of you, that work with the county and get this millage work done and making sure that there is funding going out to early childhood providers. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Heather Boswell and let her lead you through really the details of the RFP. So welcome, thank you for joining us, and I'll let Heather take over now.
Good morning, everybody. Yep, as Anne Marie mentioned, my name is Heather Boswell, and I thought I would take a moment and introduce the rest of the team. Normal circumstances, whatever normal means these days, but we would be in person presenting, and you would have the opportunity to hear from everybody on the team. But for a moment, we'll stop and do brief introductions, so you know who's working behind the scenes to make this work. Tez, our finance and accounting person who oversees the invoicing and helps us keep track of the money. We have Christine Timble Larson, who oversees the contracts and the assessment, the annual assessments related to the contracting process. We have Jill Salisbury, who supports us with keeping track of the documents and editing the documents to make sure that things make sense when they get sent out. We have Megan Strang, who supports the website, making sure that things stay up to date, and also the weekly communications too. She helps with that and making sure that those get out and we keep everybody on the same page. Shelby French, she supports with accounts payable, making sure that all of our vendors get paid. She also helps the team with process documentation. So as we are kind of building the plane here, she's the one that sits down with the team and puts together the documentation that documents the processes that we follow. And last but not least, but we have Tyler Eamon, who is our data and outcomes guy. So he is the person that really is key to the data collection related to Ready by 5, sits down with all of our partners to help support with the data collection process. And as we are continuing to collect more data, we'll be helping with some of the network analysis that will be happening in the coming months. So huge round of applause for these guys. This would not be possible without this team. So kudos to all of you. And since we are meeting virtually, we'll put down some virtual guidelines. Normally we have a paper sign-in sheet for individuals who are attending. We ask that you please take a moment to include your name and agency in the chat. If you have questions, please include your questions in the chat as well. We will hold all the questions until the end and answer as many as possible at the end of the presentation. Just so you know, this session is being recorded, so we will share the recording of this session. And also, so everybody's aware, the documents are available on the First Steps Kent website. If you go to www.firststepskent.org, you will see a Village tab in the top right corner. And if you kind of scroll down to the funding opportunities and scroll down to the middle of the page, you'll see more information right here. So click on that link and you will find all the documents that we are talking about in this presentation. So with that, we'll get going. So we had just heard from Anne Marie about the history of the millage, and that First Steps Kent was selected to be the administrator of the funding related to the millage dollars. Let's take a moment and talk through what First Steps Kent is responsible for exactly in this role. So we pulled some language straight from our contract and included it here. First Steps Kent shall be responsible for the development, coordination, implementation, and administration of millage services delivery systems. So this means that we will hold an annual and open competitive proposal funding allocation process for service providers to apply. That's exactly what we're doing today. We will establish a resident proposal review board to make recommendations around funding and how much should be allocated to each proposal. And First Steps Kent will, we will be sure to provide a visible point of contact for Kent County residents and service providers. So we have an office at Hall and 131, which we are normally at. We also maintain a presence through a website, through regular communications, thanks to Megan, and also a number of virtual meetings as well. So we'll take a step back. I want to touch on that Resident Proposal Review Board really quick. The Resident Proposal Review Board, they are the community board that is responsible for reviewing proposals submitted through this RFP process. And they are the body that makes recommendations on what proposals should be funded and how much. So this is a 9-person committee, and it's made up of 2 appointed county commissioners, 1 county administrative staff person from Kent County, a First Steps Kent Commission member, an early childhood expert, and 4 parents of children aged 0 to 5 from the community. So getting back to the other responsibilities that First Steps Kent has as the administrator. First Steps Kent assures that service options are readily available to individuals. So these are our children and family here in Kent County. So to individuals seeking services. We are responsible for outreach efforts designed to educate the community regarding available services. We are responsible for promoting participation by service providers in Ready by 5. We are responsible for conducting an early childhood community needs assessment every 2 years. And we will be beginning that process in 2021. We are responsible for contract and financial administration of the funds, and we are responsible for service provider quality assurance. And we do this through an annual monitoring process and regular reporting. So as an organization who receives Ready by 5 millage funds, there are some requirements for those agencies. We pulled this language from the proposing agency agreement, and you will find this in attachment B of the RFP. These are just a few highlights. We highly recommend that you spend some time reviewing that full document. But a few that we'll highlight here today, as a proposing agency, by signing that agreement, you are telling us that you possess the potential ability to perform successfully under the terms and conditions set forth in the RFP. So things that will be considered include, in addition to the proposal, the proposing agency's integrity, record of past performance, and financial and technical resources. The proposing agency must meet all financial requirements outlined in the RFP. And First Steps Kent reserves the right to reject any proposal if the evidence submitted by or investigation of such proposing agency fails to satisfy First Steps Kent, what we write in the RFP, and if there's question of an agency not being able to fulfill any of the requirements that we'll continue to go through, we have the right to reject that proposal. So a little bit that you should consider as you are submitting a proposal. Ready by 5 early childhood millage funds are taxpayer dollars. So these dollars look a lot different than philanthropic, private, many other sources of funding. So these dollars are intended to fund services for children ages birth through 5, as well as expecting mothers living in Kent County. This funding is designed to cover the cost of direct services, as well as reasonable administrative costs. So all of these costs will be justified in your proposal's budget. It's also important to note that funding cannot be used to purchase equipment and property. Something else that is important to note is there is a Ready by 5 service provider manual. This manual is available on the First Steps Kent website, and it goes into detail around programming requirements, financial requirements, and reporting requirements. It really tells everything that you need to know about what is required and how it works with this type of funding. Other things to consider is services cannot be advertised as free or no cost. The reason for this is services really are not free. It is the taxpayers of Kent County that are generously paying for these services through the taxes that they pay. Millage funds are not intended to supplant existing private foundation or philanthropic funds, as well as any state, local, or federal funds already in use by your organization and that currently fund the service that you are running. The proposing agency also agrees that they will seek other sources of funding in addition to Ready by 5 funding. So this could be grants, this could be state revenue, other local revenue, federal funding. Two other pieces that we want to call out are there's a requirement for the majority of services, if not all, to solicit donations. And this is setting up the opportunity for individuals who you serve to donate any amount of funding. This is different than cost sharing. Cost sharing is a requirement for certain services, and it requires families who are over a certain income threshold share in the cost of the service that's provided, that's funded by Ready by 5. So there's more details about these in the service provider manual. We encourage you to review those sections. Finally, one more area that we'll call out is there are reporting requirements. So there are invoices for payment. This is how we pay you. These are submitted monthly, generally by the 7th of the month is when they are due. Child and or expectant mother data is submitted at the individual level to the Kent County Health Department. The Kent County Health Department is where the Ready by 5 data warehouse is housed. This is generally due by the 15th of each month. As part of the contracting process for a service that requires this, your organization will be required to sign a data share agreement with First Steps Kent and Kent County Health Department. We also want to let organizations know who are interested. The data submission that is required follows a very specific format that follows the Ready by 5 standardization data definitions. So there's more information about this on page 13 of the service provider manual. And we ask that you consider this as you are putting together your proposal. There is a quarterly report that is submitted as well. And this contains program-specific outcomes and updates. So one thing that I do want to note, and we included it as an asterisk here, 2 of the RFPs that we will be talking about today, translation and interpretation, and then the Healthy Development Fetal Infant Mortality Review Network, those RFPs will not be expected to submit the monthly data. But the invoicing and the quarterly reports, they will be required to submit some sort of report for those requirements. Okay, let's get into the request for proposals. So this round, we have a total of $2 million per year for 2 years. So $4 million over 2 years. There are 4 opportunities that this funding will be deployed across. The first area being outreach and navigation services. The second area being healthy development programming. The third being healthy development, fetal infant mortality review network lead agency. And a 4th RFP titled Parent Support, Translation and Interpretation Services. So the format of these RFPs are similar for the most part, but there are some small differences if you look at one document compared to another document. So especially keep this in mind if you are applying under more than one request for proposal. All of these we mentioned, all of these have been posted on the First Steps Kent website. And there are 5 sections. You will find an introduction in section 1. You will find RFP specifications for each service under section 2. Under Section 3, you will find application materials. Section 4, required materials. Section 5 contains details around how to submit your RFP. And there are some important attachments as well. So we'll walk through these more in detail as we continue with this presentation. So the first RFP is Outreach and Navigation Services. And these services are the front door for families accessing early childhood services, ensuring that our families with young children and our expecting mothers are connected with the right service at the right time. So these services reach out and engage expectant parents and families of young children. They let them know that services exist and what services and resources are available. And they walk alongside parents to ensure that they access the services of their choice and that it meets their need. We talk a lot in Ready by 5 about what a referral means. And we define referral as not giving a family a phone number and a brochure, but walking alongside the parent until they actually get to the front door and are in the front door of the service or have actually successfully obtained the resource that they need. So these services are offered universally in Kent County with a strategic focus on those with the highest needs. So with this RFP, First Steps Kent seeks to increase specialization within this network. We have 4 organizations that were funded that offer broad connection across the county. With this round, we are encouraging proposals from agencies who have experience reaching and supporting families in very specialized services. So examples of this could include, but are not limited to, services that work within the child welfare system, services that work with families who are experiencing homelessness, or other programs serving at-risk adults with young children. So agencies may propose how families with a very specialized need or specific need may be served within their proposal. So this could include culturally relevant services to reach specific groups and populations within Kent County not currently engaged in early childhood services. So there's more information about what outreach and navigation services look like and what we are seeking in Section 2 of the RFP. So the second RFP is Healthy Development. And we are specifically encouraging proposals in 2 areas within Healthy Development. Programming that has a focus on healthy birth outcomes. And the second area is programming beyond birth that improves child health, well-being, and child development while responding to COVID-19. So addressing those physical distancing requirements that have become a more normal part of life, and also offering services to parents who have a preference to receiving services not in person. These services should be evidence-based or at the very least evidence-informed. And we seek to reach all children in Kent County with a focus on reducing disparities. So collaboration and connections with partners. We'd like to see increased cross-sector collaboration between providers to be sure families are being connected with needed services. We also want to see services that enhance or complement the current Ready by 5 service provider network. So programming could be innovative, it could be new, it could be an expansion of current services that typically serve children and families in person and have modified their program to follow physical distancing recommendations. So we will not be funding home visiting models this round. And we foresee that there will be multiple awards under this RFP. So again, additional information and specifications can be found in section 2 of this RFP. The third area is healthy development. This falls under healthy development, but it's very specific. It is for a fetal infant mortality review network lead agency. And this is based off of a model that is implemented at the state level. And Michigan Department of Health and Human Services describes this fetal infant mortality review, which we call FEMR, as an evidence-based process of identification and analysis of factors that contribute to fetal and infant death. So FEMR complements other studies of infant death, but uses an approach that is community-based, action-oriented, and designed to bring together local health providers, consumers, advocates, and leaders. So FEMR networks are in place at the state level and in multiple counties across the state. We had one for a number of years here in Kent County. With this RFP, we seek to reestablish this network here in Kent County. So with this RFP, there will only be one agency funded. We have included some additional specifications in addition to the FEMR model. We have included the specification of including parent voice and developing recommendations. We are requiring quarterly reporting to Kent County's Early Childhood Network, so everybody has the most up-to-date information around this topic. And we are requiring an annual publication that would be available to the public that would be more in-depth and give more finalized data. So finally, the fourth RFP is parent support, translation, and interpretation services. So Ready by 5 seeks to improve access to programming by families who are not first language English or Spanish speakers. And we are seeking to do this by increasing the availability of interpretation and translation services. So programs that are funded currently by Ready by 5 would be able to reach out to providers who provide translation and interpretation services and are funded by Ready by 5 to request interpretation services to better serve families. So this RFP seeks agencies who are experienced in providing translation and interpretation services. We are looking for face-to-face, so from English to another language or vice versa. We are looking for organizations who can provide telephone and video interpretation. We are looking for organizations that can provide document translation, so English into another language. We are also interested in hearing from organizations who can provide 1 hour in-services for Ready by 5 programs to learn about cultural considerations as they serve families through translation services. So agencies in their proposal will indicate what services they are proposing to provide. It can be one of these, or it can be all of these. Due to the varied needs of different service providers, a variety of languages and a variety of certification levels are needed. So including general certification, on-demand, educational, and medical interpretation. This we intend to have multiple awardees under this RFP. And also, normally we do not assign a projection of how much would be allocated to this area. But for the purposes of these contracts, we estimate the total allocation to service providers would be no more than $200,000. And again, if you look at section 2 of the RFP, you will find more details and specifications there. So speaking of section 2, we will start digging into the different areas of the RFP. So part 1 and part 2, you will find a description of the services First Steps Kent is procuring for. It includes attributes of each service category. Part 3, you will find some funding details. We have included in all of the RFPs that contracts will be awarded for 2 years. And there's an expectation that implementation of services to organizations who are awarded will begin on January 1, 2021, and services will be up and running very quickly after that date. Part 4 gives information about program monitoring and evaluation. So it gives information on data submission requirements, and these requirements vary by RFP. So if your organization is applying for a certain RFP, you may find that you are excluded from certain requirements. And if you are excluded, it will be noted in this section of the RFP. Criteria 5 is, or part 5 is the criteria breakdown. And this gives the criteria that will be used by the Resident Proposal Review Board for scoring. So these scores are used to guide discussion and decision-making by the board. And we have given citations to section 3 related to each of these that show what questions will be considered for each of the criteria. So again, just want to reiterate, RFPs are similar for the most part, but please know that there are some small differences between the documents. So section 3, we had alluded to, and this is the application. This is the section where you will have the opportunity to give details about the service you are proposing. So things to consider as you are putting together this section. Think about how services could reach currently underserved populations and areas of Kent County. So this could be a specific group, a specific population, or a certain area of Kent County. So for example, the rural parts of Kent County. Think about your staff composition in the program, and if it's representative of the communities that you are proposing you will serve. Think about staff qualifications and compensation. So are staff qualified to deliver a quality service? And are you paying them a livable wage? Think about community partnerships. Include information about current or proposed collaborations. Think about how your proposal could enhance or complement the current Ready by 5 service provider network. Think about how there is evidence behind your proposed service, and identify the outcomes that show that the proposed service is being effective. So we ask that you provide responses to all the questions in this section. If one of the questions is truly not relevant to your proposed service, state the reason why. As you respond, do not modify the format or the order of questions in this section, and we will provide an editable Word document of this document that you can download and include with your proposal submission. So a few details as you think through this section. There is a distinction between proposal name and proposed service. Proposal name includes all elements of a proposal. The parts requesting Ready by 5 funding, and those parts of your program that are funded by other sources of funding. So every proposal must include at least one proposed service, and this proposed service is tied to a unit rate, and this is the rate in which you are paid for this service. So as you are thinking through your proposal, you may decide that invoicing under different unit rates for reimbursement makes more sense, and you may include more than one proposed service with a different rate in your submission. So an example would be your program may employ a nurse, and your program may also employ a community health worker. The cost for these positions is often different, so the agency may apply for a different rate provided by each professional. We are asking that you do not include more than 5 rates, though. And also, we want to make clear that this is optional. You will see cues for what needs to be included in a submission with more than one service, proposed service, and more than one unit rate. You'll see these mentioned throughout the RFP, but if your agency is only applying for one rate, you can disregard these cues. So let's talk more about unit rates. So this is from page 37 of the Service Provider Manual, and the proposed unit rate is the rate at which we, Ready by 5, will reimburse you. So services will be reimbursed up to the total amount of the funds that your organization is awarded. All unit rates will be fixed for the term of the contract unless modified by mutual consent of the parties. Service providers will be required to submit reports detailing units served, and forms and instructions for reporting are provided at the beginning of each calendar year and at the beginning of each contract. So in section 3, you will find questions to guide the development of your unit rate. And one of these questions is going to ask, would you prefer to invoice on a 15-minute increment per counter? So it could be per session with a child or expectant mom, or it could be a bundled per child expectant mother rate. So no matter how many times you see that child or provide a service to a child, you just pay one rate per child enrolled in your program. So once you determine how you want to define that service rate, you must determine how many of the selected units you will provide for the year. So this is a projection, and these numbers will be used to determine a unit cost. So we'll walk through an example here. We have Agency ABC. And Agency ABC is a service that's been around for a couple of years. And every year they have been serving 125 children. And they have put in a proposal to Ready by 5. And in their proposal, they have projected that they will serve an additional 75 3-year-old children. They've decided that it makes the most sense to invoice by encounter. So they expect each child they serve will receive an average of 5 encounters. So for the 75 children that they are proposing to serve, they multiply that by 5 and you get 375 encounters. So this is the number that you would include in your proposal. They put together their budget. The budget for serving these additional 75 children, which is the budget for their proposed service. They have expenses for staff, supplies, some indirect costs, and their total is $100,000. So the proposed unit rate would be $266 per encounter. So we divided that $100,000 budget that they put together, showing that to serve 75 kids, it'll be $100,000, and divided it by the encounters, and you get a unit rate per encounter. So let's recap. Each proposal will have in it at least one proposed service, and each proposed service will have an attached unit rate. So you will see attachment A referenced in this section as well. Attachment A is a separate Excel spreadsheet, and this is the document that each proposing agency will submit their budget on. So this template is also available on the First Steps Kent website. So as we mentioned earlier in the presentation, the cost for each unit rate must be justified. And this is the document that shows the expenses that justify your unit rate. So each agency will include their total program budget in this form. So this and the budget for each proposed service will be included in this template as well. So we put some colors in here that hopefully make this a little more clear. The light blue is your total program costs. The dark blue, the darker blue, are formulas that we put in there to be helpful. And we ask that you do not change these. They'll help you add up your numbers correctly. And the yellow is for proposed service costs. So let's go back to agency ABC. So this is the organization. Currently, they're serving 125 children. In their request for Ready by 5 funding, they project they will serve an additional 75 3-year-olds. So the light blue, the total program budget, should include the revenue and the total expenses to serve 200 total children. So this is kind of the universe of your program. The costs, including those covered being proposed to Ready by 5, would be included in these light blue fields. The yellow, the proposed service, this would be the cost to serve only the 75 3-year-olds that you are proposing you will serve. So only the direct and indirect costs related to this proposed service would be included in the yellow fields. The number of individuals served would follow similarly. The total children served by the program would be included in the blue, and this would be 200. And then 75 per year would be included in the yellow field, because this is how many children that will be served by Ready by 5 by your proposal, by your proposed, your proposal of Ready by 5. So if you have more than one proposed service, so if you decide that you are going to propose a service for a nurse and you are going to propose a service for a community health worker, you will submit this budget template separately for each service. The only information that should change in each submitted budget template, if you are doing this, is the proposed services, so the yellow fields. So your overall budget should not change. Only the costs related to your 2 or 3 different proposed services would be different. And so those are the yellow fields. The description for each line item should be for your total budget. So you'll see description of total budget costs there on the right. These should not change if you submit for more than one proposed service and unit rate. So I want to note here, agencies responding to the interpreter and translation RFP are not required to submit this attachment. There is a different budget template that is included in your RFP that will be used in lieu of this. Also, the fetal infant mortality review lead agency template is a little bit different. So there's some components that we did not include in that template. So additional budget considerations. The unit rate includes all reasonable direct and indirect costs to deliver a service. Below are some examples of costs your agency should consider. So this is not an exhaustive list, but just some ideas to think about. Examples of direct costs would include wages, benefits, and fringe costs for the staff that are directly providing your service. You should also consider costs for professional development and travel. The program supplies needed to run your program would also be included here. Think about subscription to services. So Zoom is an example that perhaps your nurse or your community health worker needs to deliver the service. Materials to advertise the Ready by 500 program. So if you are developing brochures or postcards. And then if your organization, if the program requires renting a space, for example, a library, it may not be applicable in the COVID situations, but if there is a specific cost to obtain a location in the community, that could be considered a direct cost, as long as it is directly related to the service that you are providing. Examples of indirect costs include supervisor time and quality improvement time. Data support for reporting. We suggest that you think about adding some time, especially if your organization is required to submit monthly data reports. Communications, and then you have those additional administrative costs, things like finance, IT, human resources, rent, those other necessities that are part of running an organization, but not directly related to the program. So again, we want to mention that Ready by 5 funding cannot be used to purchase equipment and property. Those expenses will have to be covered by your other sources of funding. So section 4, we get into the required materials. This round, we are requesting that all materials be submitted electronically. So there are very specific requirements in the RFP, how this will be done. So please take time to review these specifications before it's time to submit. One thing we wanted to call out was PDF documents must be combined or bound into one document. So no zipped files with multiple PDFs will be accepted. We are also asking that Appendix A be submitted in the Excel format. and not put in PDF or some other format. So we have these requirements in place because with submittals, there are a number of documents, and we want to be sure that all documents are carefully tracked. And your organization following these specifications will allow us to do this. So one note for the PDF formatting, if you Google, how do I combine multiple PDF files into one for free, there are resources. So we suggest that you check those out if you don't currently have a paid copy of Adobe. So section 5, the RFP process, the deadline is October 12th at 1 p.m. This deadline is firm, no exceptions. See section 5 for more details. Proposals will only be accepted in electronic format. And again, we touched on some of the details in section 4. Please take time to read through that section to see all the details. So 4 and 5, those are really important sections to review to understand how the submittal process will work. And please note, proposals will only be considered complete if they meet all of the requirements outlined in section 4 and section 5. So if your proposal is missing elements, First Steps Kent may disqualify the proposal from further evaluation. So again, please look at these sections. As this is a competitive process, there is a formal question and answer period. And what this means is requests for clarification and interpretation of the RFP must only be made in writing. So at this time, now that we are officially in the RFP process, we cannot accept questions by email, by telephone, by text, or if the opportunity presents itself, in person. So we ask that all questions be asked by September 28th, 2020, 5 p.m. There is a form that we are asking that you use to submit these questions. This is the only way that we will submit questions. The link to that is in section 5, part 3. You will also find the link posted on the First Steps Kent website. So we will work to get replies to all of your questions up as soon as possible. And we will post all final answers and notifications of any amendments that we might have to do to the RFP. We will post these on the First Steps Kent website by October 2nd at 5 p.m. We also want to make sure that everybody understands that it's your agency's responsibility to monitor all inquiries, including those submitted by other agencies that we publish, to properly prepare your proposal for submission. The timeline, September 10th and 11th, we have the virtual pre-conference. Here we are. We have posted the RFP to the First Steps Kent website. On September 25th, we will be convening our Ready by 5 Resident Proposal Review Board for an orientation. On September 28th, RFP question and answer period ends 5 p.m. October 2nd, we will have responses to you posted on the website. October 12th is the deadline. November 10th through 13th, the Proposal Review Board will meet, and this is when they will review your proposals or have discussion. They will have already reviewed them, but the discussion and the scoring and the determination of allocations will happen during this 3-day period. December 4th, we will announce awards. And then the first week of December, there will be a new awardee orientation. And January 1, the service partner contracts begin. So you are aware there is some gaps in that timeline, some of that being that the approval process requires that the Resident Proposal Review Board make recommendations around the allocations. This needs to be approved by the First Steps Kent Commission, and the final approval comes from the Kent County Board of Commissioners. So we will post the dates of when those are happening as well. We also want to let you know that we may be reaching out by email to you regarding questions and clarifications. This is specifically probably most likely going to happen during the time that the Resident Proposal Review Board meets. So anticipate that you will very likely receive some emails about your proposal. And we will be requesting an urgent response because we only have 3 days. And this will happen beginning November 10th and should end November 13th. Questions will only be sent to the proposal contacts listed on the cover page of your proposal. So please double check that the email and phone contact information for this individual is correct. And all organizations, as we mentioned, awarded funding will be required to attend that new awardee orientation. So the last part of the RFP, we talked about attachment A, which is the budget template. We have attachment B and C. Please take time to review these documents. We also want to call out to your attention that the agreement must be signed by the executive director, president, or CEO, so your agency, your organization lead, and the board chairperson of your organization. So please consider that as you are preparing your document for submission. So we have a bit of time for questions. As mentioned earlier, please add your questions in the chat box. Remember, after this Q&A session ends, all questions will need to be asked through the online process. Any questions that are not answered today will be answered on the Q&A document posted on the First Steps Kent website, and we will be sure to include questions and answers that we answer here verbally today as well.
Hi, Heather.
Hi.
We do have one question so far, and just a reminder, if anybody showed up and didn't put their name in the chat, go ahead and do that now with your agency. But a question from Christine said, you mentioned that no home visiting models will be funded in this cycle. So if a home visiting model has been adjusted for virtual sessions as well as in-home, will that be considered?
No, we're not funding home visiting models this round.
Okay, that's the only one so far, so maybe we give it a, oh, I got another one. You mentioned virtual sessions under healthy development due to COVID. What does that imply? No in-person sessions either, not at home or at facilities?
So we ask that the requirements posted by the CDC and also here locally, State of Michigan, Kent County Health Department, that programs be able to function in compliance with those requirements. So currently, there is the option to provide in-service. What we are trying to get at are programs that can, shift and be able to deliver services in accordance with these requirements. But we're also hearing from a lot of parents that even though there are ways to offer in-person supports with safety measures in place, parents are very hesitant to still accept these services. So we are open to ideas that would allow families who simply don't feel safe accepting in-person services at this time, how services can be delivered to those families.
Okay. One question from Candace came up. Do computers count as equipment or supplies?
So there is a cost threshold, and we are actually going to post some more information on that. So please look for an update on that.
Okay, that's all the questions we have so far. Maybe wait a couple minutes.
Sure.
Okay, we got another one. In the past, the final signatures needed to be inked on one of the turned in applications. With us turning everything in virtually, are electronic signatures okay? Or would you prefer a scanned copy of the inked signature?
So every organization has put in their own signature process. So if your organization allows digital or electronic signatures, we will accept signatures that follow the processes and procedures that your organization has put in place for signatures.
Okay, can we get a list of everyone who participated in both of the sessions as we look for partnership opportunities and alignment?
Yes, yep, we can post that on the website. We'll put it in the Q&As. How's that, Megan?
Okay, yep, that
Cool.
works. And then another question, how do we define home visiting model?
So it is a model that if, there are some evidence-based research models that are available. We can post the clearinghouses that give all of the information about what models are considered home visiting. So we will post those in the questions, but essentially, if you were to think about if your model were to be delivered in the home typically, and is not COVID, that may be a good guideline to follow.
One came in from Christine. Is home visiting models not allowed in any RFP this round?
We're not funding home visiting models, that's correct.
Okay, I think that's all.
Well, thank you on behalf of First Steps Kent and the Ready by 5 team. Oh, is there one more? No? Okay. I saw the orange box pop up in the corner of my eye. Thank you, everybody. Please continue to review the documents, submit your questions through the online form, and we look forward to hearing from you. And thank you so much for your partnership here.